Welcome, CanadianPheonix here with another Topic of the Week video, and this week I'll be talking about Hohenheim from Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist. It feels weird if you don't say it twice in different tones. This week's topic was submitted by CanadianPheonix 12, and their topic is: I was wondering if you could discuss Van Hohenheim from Fullmetal Alchemist, and what makes him such a great character. Yes, I can. Now, before I get into this, I will say spoilers for the manga and Brotherhood. Not for 2003. I won't be talking about 2003 Hohenheim because Fullmetal Alchemist 2003 is an entirely different beast. But yes, I will say spoilers for the manga and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood because it's great, and I really recommend not spoiling yourself. So, don't spoil yourself. Go watch Brotherhood, read the manga, because I will be talking about all stuff all the way till the end of the series. So with that warning out of the way, Hohenheim was such an interesting character, and when I was watching Brotherhood for the first time years ago, I never expected to like Hohenheim as much as I do now. Hohenheim is one of those characters where you start off thinking that they're not going to be that great, and you just end up loving them. I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way when they were first getting started, that you feel like Hohenheim is your typical sort of like, negligent dad who abandoned his family. And, of course, this attitude is reflected by Ed, who really, really can't stand him, and just, he hates his dad for just leaving them. But once you start getting context for his character, it all starts making sense. Like, once you get his backstory, that he's a nigh immortal walking philosopher's stone, that he has near infinite power because of the hundreds of thousands of lives inside him, and his entire plan, that you find out at the end of the series, the reason he left, the reason he was out, was because he had planned to counter Father's, the dwarf and the flask, plans to take in the power of God and become the perfect being. Because of what Hohenheim did, he saved everyone. He saved the 50 million people in Amistris and stopped Father from winning. Had he not, Father would have won. He would have won. He would have had godlike power, and no one could have stopped him. But it was because of Hohenheim's actions that he saved the world, basically. And obviously he cares about his family. He's just a little awkward. He is a 400-year-old being, so he wasn't really like used to it, and he tried, but he really did try. But he obviously had bigger things to do, and I honestly think that, leaving his family to save the world, sure, yeah, it personally hurt Ed specifically. Al probably had some issues too, but it was mostly Ed that had these hang-ups with Hohenheim. It's like, but when you start off the series, you don't really expect that, because he leaves, Trisha dies, Ed and Al tried to use human transmutation to bring her back. Ed loses his arm and his leg in the process. Al loses his body and ends up affixed to a suit of armor. And then he doesn't come back. And so you would probably think that, he just left them. No. He left them for a good reason. And, this is why Trisha never held anything against him. She knew what was up. I don't really remember how much she actually knew, or if they ever talk about that, but she obviously knows that Hohenheim wasn't the kind to abandon his family, and I'm sure he probably explained to her, I kind of have to save the world. I have to go back and, I have to read the manga or go back and rewatch all of Brotherhood, but I really don't have the time to go back and do that right now. I did rewatch a good chunk of Brotherhood, though, for this video, and I was crying because I was watching a lot of the end stuff, and I'm just like, ugh, gosh, it still gets to me. But Hohenheim is one of those type of characters that he really is complex. He did some things that would be considered very unlikable, leaving his family for years. And then he acts rather nonchalant when he meets his sons again, which, of course, then gets decked by Ed. But you really do, when you find out his backstory, that he was a slave in Xerxes, that he was tricked by the dwarf in the flask, or the first homunculus, that he was basically given these nigh immortal powers and turned into a philosopher's stone by the dwarf because he was tricked into murdering his entire country. And, seeing Hohenheim, in the ruins of Xerxes with everyone dead was... Yeah, that was bad. That was terrible. That was just awful and heart-wrenching. But you do find out, and you find out near the end of the series, that Hohenheim not only was working against Father the whole time to try to, counteract his plans, but he actually got to know all of the people inside of him. Over the course of 400 years, I want to say it was I don't remember the exact number. I think it was around, 500,000. But all those souls inside of him, he talked to them. He got to know them. He could name them all. Because he spent that time getting to know them. And he makes a point that, sure, it may seem ridiculous, but I had plenty of time. And it was because of that they all worked, that all the people of of Xerxes inside of him, all their souls, he talked to them, he got to know them, and they worked with him to fight Father. They became his allies. It was because of them that he was able to, stop Father's plans by placing them all over Amistris in order to, set up their their counter plan. And I remember when I was first watching Brotherhood and he reveals that, I was just like, oh, dang. And and, at first, I never thought, when I first started, I never thought I would like Hohenheim, but by the time I got to the end of the series, I would found it hard not to like him. He's just so likable, and his attitude is hilarious. Sure, yeah, he does have his emotional moments, particularly when he takes the family photo with Trisha, Al, and Ed, when he's crying his eyes out. And they took the picture, but this is Arakawa. This is the great thing about Arakawa. Hohenheim never gets too ultra serious. This is overall Fullmetal Alchemist. Despite dark stuff happening, despite there being serious moments, Fullmetal Alchemist always retains a sense of humor and levity, and it always makes sure to not get too grim dark. It gets dark, but the proper amounts. And shoot, this is one of the few series that I think has actually handled death and of characters that I actually really liked really well, and made these deaths meaningful. That's how good the writing of this series is. It doesn't do that very often, but it actually did. It's just that well written, and it knows not to completely rub the darkness in your face. And Hohenheim basically represents this. Hohenheim has a horrifically dark backstory. Aiding in the essentially the deaths of 100, a million people. He didn't mean to. It wasn't something that he had planned. He didn't really understand what was going on, but the homunculus was the one, playing him, and by the end of the whole plan, the entire country of Xerxes is dead, and he was responsible. And he feels guilty about that, and he tries to make up for this by saving the people of Amistris, and saves that 50 million people, and the countless more that probably would have suffered under Father's power. And he does feel bad about having to leave his family. He says this, that he takes responsibility, that, he's at the very least partially responsible for Ed and Al doing human transmutation and ending up in the situations that they do. Because he wasn't there. He could have said, don't do this is a bad idea, and he could have stopped them. But he wasn't there, so the kids got ambitious. And And he does blame himself, and he straight up at the end of the series, he offers to use his own life for whatever he has left after the battle with Father, to bring Al back from the other side of the gate, from the gate of truth, or whatever that little dimension is. And then he really feels that if he wants to do it as a father, that he's guilty of being negligent essentially with his children, that he realizes that he could have done so much better, but to try to make up for it a bit, he wants to sacrifice himself, and Ed refuses it. He doesn't want to sacrifice anyone, and Ed doesn't want to use a Philosopher's Stone, and this is what he ends up sacrificing his alchemy to bring Al back. But Hohenheim does care, and it was just because he wasn't there that Ed basically was imagining he doesn't care. He ran off. And it's funny because you do see that at the end of the series he does lighten up with Hohenheim, particularly when they're dealing with Father. But he still has to throw insults out because he's Edward Elric. This is what he does. But overall, you can see that he sees that his father was not bad, and he ends up pretty much dressing similarly to him at the end of the series anyway, too. But yeah, and when Hohenheim goes back to their hometown, he goes to Trisha's grave immediately, and he talks to her, and then he dies, content, having helped his save the world, helped his sons. And then he goes and dies at the grave of his wife, the woman he loved. And that scene gets me every time. But yeah, at the end, you just love Hohenheim. It's like, and it's one of those things where, I take back every bad thing I said about you, Hohenheim, kind of a thing, by the time you reach the end. But it's so funny how Arakawa crafted his character, that no matter what interpretation you had of him before, by the time you actually understand his character, you change. Like my views on Hohenheim changed complete and total 180, because this is the great writing of Fullmetal Alchemist. Good job, Arakawa. Like it's great, but it's so interesting that his character has so much depth. And shoot, Hohenheim arguably is one of the most important characters in the series, and in terms of the lore of the series. Shoot, like he has his hand in almost everything, because he's been working, hard to try to stop Father. And by the end of it, you understand all of his actions. And Hohenheim is one of the deepest characters. Granted, there's depth to pretty much everyone. Even freaking Kimberly has a little more depth than you would expect, and especially when he's responsible for ultimately defeating Pride, just to be petty, just to be like, hey, I would have let you do everything you wanted and be a complete evil person, because I'm evil. Says, but you didn't stick to your principles, so I'm going to help kill you. And even Greed, who literally is the embodiment of, greed, has depth, and ends up, sacrificing himself to help, to help fight Father. But yeah, Hohenheim is such an interesting character. Shoot, you could do in-depth looks at everyone in Fullmetal Alchemist, but Hohenheim sticks out to me really, and I'm glad you asked about this, because I love Hohenheim's character. I think that's pretty much all I can really say about Hohenheim. I've kind of gone over most everything, because he has kind of a fairly a side role in the series until you get towards near the end of the series, where he actually becomes really important, and this is where you really start finding out a lot of stuff about him. But yeah, I think I pretty much explained why he's an interesting character. He's got depth. And you know, you really sympathize with him, you care about him, and shoot, he's one of the, by the end, you know, when he dies, it's one of those things where I just kind of would have liked to have seen him spend some more time with his sons, because he only gets to see them near that part, in that, you know, that short time of the series, but the writing is so good that, you know, I felt so content with his character at the end. You know, you feel content with everything, and you feel content with Fullmetal Alchemist. That's a nice little note to end it on. So I'm going to end it right here. If you want to submit a topic to me, just follow the rules I'll be posting down below. And if you're on YouTube, you can comment below about what you want me to talk about. Or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.